Hello everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here. Summa Triggerum, Summa Spoilerum, Summa Tangentum. I had an excellent comment on one of my previous videos on my review of the Super Mario Adventures comic, which was originally published as a manga and then serialized in the Nintendo Power magazine. So I'm probably going to float that comment in front of us here with a little movie magic so you can see that, because the commenter essentially pointed me in the direction of the original manga, which serialized both Super Mario Adventures and this Legend of Zelda manga. It was essentially a manga aimed at elementary school aged Japanese school children younger than Shonen Jump readers. And I was just interested to find out some of the history through this great comment from the YouTube community. Thank you. So, with that, this manga is very westernized in its style, and that's one of the things that's of interest to me about it. Did they transform it when it came overseas? Was it actually drawn in a Western left to right format and published like that for young Japanese kids? Did they have to read like a little warning that said, hey kids, you got to read this left to right like they do over in America? I'm just really curious and really interested to, I don't know if I'll ever visit Japan. I love manga and anime so much, but I don't know if that's enough reason for me to go visit there. But I would be dead curious to see the original Japanese versions of these comics. That said, this is a high recommend. I'm not sure this is one of my highest recommendations. I think in part because my love of the Legend of Zelda franchise helps make this book much more impactful to me. There was, as I was reading the first chunk of it, I was loving this. I kept stopping to think about how amazing this was, what I was reading. And then when I got about to the halfway point, I started slowing down a bit and slogging. And I don't think that was the fault of the comic. I think that might have been the fault of me trying to read this in one or two sittings. Because these were meant to be serialized and read once a month, it might be better for you to read a couple chapters, take a break, come back later that week, read a couple chapters, and digest it in that format, because these are dense chapters. This is also an example of what I would call the old school manga style, which is heavily influenced by Osamu Tezuka, Astro Boy, Princess Knight. He was the grandfather of manga. And so it's actually kind of ironically a less dynamic style, but I'm going to defend it. It's really, Shotaro is a master of his craft, and this is an excellent work. I think contemporary manga fans should be looking at stuff like this, not just Tezuka, but I'm going to be looking for more of Shotaro Ishinomori's work now, because he gets a lot of stuff, even though it doesn't benefit from some of the dynamism of later manga. I think so there's pro cons to this stuff. New manga, the pro is it's really dynamic, lots of crazy over the top angles, but the con is sometimes it's a little too crazy and hard to discern. The con of this manga is sometimes it's a little too straightforward, doesn't do too much crazy stuff, but the pro of that is it's very legible and very easy to understand. I think there were maybe 2 pages in the entire book where I had a panel mix up, and Shotaro is just putting all kinds of crazy detail and action into his panels. So he's not relying on crazy panel compositions to get you invested. He's relying on a good old adventure story with a lot of passionate, primal ideas and good morals, and his kick-ass drawing to get you invested. This is boss. So I'm not going to do a story time with Uncle Marmaduke fan for this entire book, because this is a high recommend. I think you should go read this. I think I will do a storybook time with Uncle Marmaduke fan for the first maybe chapter or 2, so you can get a taste of it, whet your appetite a bit, and I can point out some great artistic moments as we go. I'm glad they chose this moment for the inside cover, because it's a really terrifying kind of image, and I don't think I'm going to get this far. This is near the climax of the whole story. So someone commented on one of my videos that I was channeling Jordan Peterson a bit, which I appreciated. I respect Dr. Jordan Peterson, but I wouldn't call myself a Jordan Peterson fanboy. I haven't sat down and watched all his videos. I keep running into these annoying YouTube videos that are like a clip of 30 seconds of Jordan Peterson, so I click on it thinking, yeah, what the heck, I'll listen to him while I work, and then it's like he says 30 seconds worth of content, and then it's some channel that has hundreds and hundreds of little clips of Jordan Peterson talking. Stop doing that. But the reason I'm thinking about Jordan Peterson is he talks a lot about primal ideas in stories and what these may mean. He's coming at it from the perspective of a psychologist who's interested in people's psychology. I'm more coming at this from the perspective of an artist who's interested in telling stories with art and in my stories having good morality to them. And the Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, this franchise started this channel because I was reading a Akira Himekawa manga, and I was getting so passionate. I was thinking about the themes of the story and why I loved it, and I had this kind of crippling realization that this thing that I loved, this primal, beautiful story of Link loving Zelda and risking his life to rescue Zelda, was problematic from a third-wave feminist perspective, and that this group would never stop calling it out. So I could either ignore SJWs all my life and hope they would leave me and my favorite franchises and stories alone, or I could recognize that this philosophy, this social justice left philosophy, hates the morality and the ethos and the pathos of this kind of romantic, heroic story, and they're never going to rest until this idea within the human imagination of a young boy growing up, risking his life for someone he loves. They want that gone because it reinforces the white cis heteronormative Christian patriarchy. The Legend of Zelda story is coming from Nintendo, this powerful, beautiful story of heroism being retold in a beautiful way. And I am, maybe even more than something like Peter Parker or Samurai Jack, playing the Legend of Zelda games and reading the Legend of Zelda manga has informed how I treat people, because I'm never going to run into a princess who needs to be rescued from a monster, but this story informs who you are and what kind of person you want to be. You don't want to be like Ganondorf. You want to be like Link. You want to be someone admirable and respectable. I love that this is in color. Black and white has become the standard in the manga industry, and I suppose it makes it cheaper to produce, but this is such a great example of how color can be used. Shotaro is using watercolor, but he's using a very simple color palette of bright watercolors. So, it's fantastic. Mwah, que bella. He's always considerate of helping you visually separate things and changing up his color palette so that it's easy to separate the panels. It's bright, simple colors for a bright, simple, but powerful story. So this isn't the only adaptation of this video game. He changed a few plot points and added a few characters. So I just love this as a standalone comic. So if you love the video game, get ready for some changes and some of its own tone and flavor. But this is an excellent standalone story. So it begins with Link waking up in the middle of the night, hearing the voice of a beautiful woman calling his name. And that turns out to be Princess Zelda calling him from afar in peril. And he puts on the iconic green outfit that's a little silly. He wears this because this is a peasant's outfit. In later games, this became more of like a cool dude's, ridiculously long, cool-looking pointed hat. But it's based off sort of silly little Renaissance clothing from medieval paintings. And one of the things I was thinking about while reading this one is this predates the N64 version of the character. So we're getting at a very old version of the Link character who's similar to the Link of later games, but it has some of its own flavor. One of the things I think about is how in the Nintendo Entertainment System game, Link would carry around a shield with a Christian cross on it. And sure, there were fairies and magical things, but in the first couple games, this could feel like Christian medieval Europe, a kind of Japanese fairy tale idea of a romanticized knights in shining armor in merry old England or France or something. And then by the time when the N64 came out, then they came up with their own set of goddesses, their pantheon, polytheistic religion. So even though the later games still have that kind of Christian-ish medieval flair to them, once they started getting their own kind of fantasy religion, they became more of their own world. In this, it's a little bit more hazy. It's called Hyrule, but it could be England. You could imagine this as a story which takes place in our world at this point in Link's history. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not saying I want Link to be a Christian or for overt Christian themes to be in this story. I'm just pointing out that it's kind of interesting that this early on, the goddesses of Hyrule weren't a thing yet. Some of the history of Hyrule wasn't a thing yet, but these very basic, powerful fantasy ideas were here. They float the idea that once every 100 years, a hero arises named Link, which that shocked me a little bit because I didn't think they came up with that until years later, almost a decade later with The Wind Waker. Yet here in this manga, they're floating this idea that Link is a generational hero. Once every 100 years, a hero named Link arises to save the day. So that surprised me a little bit, that here in this manga we're seeing things that would later come into the franchise in the video games being played around with here by this manga artist. And one possible explanation for that is the video game makers paid attention to this manga, maybe kept some of these ideas in the back burner for later while they were designing the games. And another theory might be that these are such great ideas for stories that of course they were going to use them. Of course they were going to use the idea of a generational hero. Of course they were going to use the idea of Link being a sort of werewolf type of character in decades later. Yeah, almost a decade later, I think. Twilight Princess, what would that have been? Around 2004? Over a decade after this, they recycled ideas from this manga in the game. They're great. So all right, that's enough of me bloviating. Let's dive in. So Link escapes from the knights. Gosh, 10 minutes of me bloviating. I'm sorry, guys. Summa tangentum, here we go. And he walks in on his uncle being struck dead by the wicked wizard Aghanim. And immediately he must hurry on to rescue Zelda. And one of the things I notice about this is in this early part of his adventure, Link is a little bit whiny and he kind of clowns himself a little bit, but it's subtle. He's not tripping and falling on his face or being belittled or anything. He's just a little bit of a nervous, whiny personality, some way, who's not too eager to die, even though he's doing the right thing and coming to Princess Zelda's aid. And he keeps failing in these early chapters. So after he thinks he's rescued Zelda and gotten her out of there, and we've established that he's kind of swooning over how beautiful she is, Aghanim shows up and wrecks Link hard. He after zapping him once, Link's trembling, and after zapping him a second time, Link is down for the count, and boom, he's got Zelda. Link has failed. He sucks at his job so far, and that's chapter 1. Observation number 2 is these great splash pages. I read several comics this year, like Phoenix Resurrection, that would devote 1 or 2 whole pages to just some words being typed, a blank color in the background, and then a box describing what's going on. Look at what's being done with these title pages to get us invested into the world. These are really just the things to let us know what's happened in the previous chapter and set up the story with a few flavorful shots. Look at all this. Okay, our hero, villains in pursuit, but they're kind of abstract. So it's kind of like he's floating in space above them. Maybe there could be a hill or something that he's standing on, but we're separating all these ideas. The castle, a massive castle filling almost 2 pages to give us a massive sense of scope, and we're looking at it from a worm's eye view. And then these horses floating in air. So we carry right from here, boom, right into the landscape and the rush of the chase. And a goofy, silly picture of Link on a wanted poster. We've got heroes, we've got heroism, we've got comedy, we've got danger, we've got place and time and scope, all in 2 pages before the story even starts picking up. You could skip these 2 pages and still understand the story, but it's grabbing you by the ear and saying, pay attention, little kid reading Nintendo Power, because I'm gonna knock your socks off. Prime real estate. Don't waste that space. All right, so Link escapes with the aid of an old guy who aids him because they recognize the king has been turned evil. And Link finds an old man who sends him on his way to find the wise old man Sahasrara. He seeks advice from people about how to get there, and it turns out it was a kind of lizard man in disguise. Look at this. So this is what I'm talking about. So far, if you've been watching this, you've probably seen this sort of very simple, cutesy style of drawing Link. And what I want to defend about this is that Shotaro Ishinomori, you might look at that and say, oh, it's just cutesy little drawings of a goofy cartoon character with big cartoony hands. Look at this. A thatched roof cottage with a water wheel and a tree and forescapes in the background. Maybe he had photo reference. Maybe he visited Amsterdam or something to see the thatched roofs there. But this guy can draw all kinds of stuff. And he fills his world with these detailed little perspectives of mountains and castles and quaint little cottages and forests and rivers and trees. It makes it immersive, a beautiful, lived-in, natural world for Link to occupy. And then because Link is so simple, you can identify with him very easily. I think the reason that Link in the video games looks so effeminate is to try to help young girls and young boys identify with him as they play the character. And then if you project yourself on the character, you can imagine him as a bit more rough and masculine in your own mind, or a little bit more feminine in your own mind, if that's how you feel, or if that helps you become him in the world of the video game. He's a little bit more Luke Skywalker-ish in this version. He has the hint of his own distinct personality, which might distinguish him from other versions of the Link character, but he's still a general hero character where you look at him and you can see yourself as him. Both, and I love that it works in whether we're talking about the video games with this character or these stories with this character. So the old crone tells him about the sword of legend and where it lies hidden, right? It's like Excalibur. You got to go pull the sword from the stone. And then we get this great action scene with these, I think they're called dark nuts, these massive knights smashing trees with their maces. And this isn't, like, again, this isn't using like big dynamic vertical or diagonal or upside down panels, and it doesn't need to. Using this very horizontal Western feel. I guess there's a little bit of angles being used in some of these panels, but it's not, it's still very horizontal. You read left to right on all of these pages. But what sells it is all these action lines and understanding how deadly these maces are by seeing the consequence of it knocking over a tree in a single swoop. Cartoonily, Link evades danger all this time, and it's for laughs. It's cute and comedic as he's avoiding this danger, but it still feels powerful and threatening based on what we've seen these weapons do. Link falls and barely escapes. This is a great little example of Link kind of whining to himself. He can't believe that the old man has gotten through all of these dangerous cliffs and slimy swamps. How did he do it? He's just a feeble old man. Oh, he's a nervous personality. Look at this. So this isn't the most dynamic angle. It's not like a worm's eye view. We're not really getting to see Link's over-the-top reaction of awe as he looks on this building. Yet this is very impactful and very powerful, even though it's got this sort of straight, flat-on angle I've roasted in other comics. And I think what is saving this is all the detail it's giving me. It's giving me a full sense of this massive, powerful building, this spectacular place where I'd want to go and see this with my own two eyes. So even though it doesn't... I see kind of like the very dynamic style of later manga as developing slowly over time, especially maybe in the 90s through the 2000s, where it just if this was a 2000s manga, we'd be seeing it like from an extreme worm's eye view looking up, and you'd see like a little pinprick in the sky of the top of this building. This lets you see the whole thing and kind of understand it as an idea. It's detailed. It's giving you lots of texture of broken bricks and such, but some of it is simplified, so he's not spending his entire life doing this one massive page. It suggests the idea of texture in some of this, particularly in the back, where it fades to just a few, some hatching in the back for the steers in the distance. So more detail in the front. It's smart use of time and smart use of details to give the whole thing this feel and this flavor. And excellent watercoloring in the background to suggest this stormy sky in the distance. Oh, there's so much potential for manga artists to bring color into their own world. And Shotaro, he's not just a great draftsman, he's a great painter too. Oh, golly gee willikers. So, Link finds the ancient wizard. He has such a weird name, I keep forgetting. Sasahara or something. So, and the wizard sends him to find the pendants of virtue. Courage, wisdom, and power. They reuse these ideas over and over again in this franchise, but in the context of this story, I feel like this is something of a metaphor. Link has started as a young boy who's a little bit whiny. This is a journey that's not just about him defeating a bad guy and saving a princess. This is a story about a young man becoming a grown man and learning valuable character traits that he needs to have all his life during his journey. So this is where you can take this out and apply it into your own life. Link has to find pendants of virtue. He has to gain the virtues of wisdom, power, and courage on his journey. So knights show up to defeat him, and I love how masculine Link is. I will rise to the challenge of the pendants, and with their power I will destroy you, Aghanim. I like the worldview of this story better than the worldview of Star Wars. At the end of The Empire Strikes Back, Luke goes to face Palpatine and Darth Vader, and he doesn't want to fight Darth Vader because he's afraid that he's going to turn over to the dark side if he gives in to his anger. Link also has this story of potentially giving into his anger and becoming a monster. But there's this idea in this story that his anger against Aghanim for murdering his uncle is justified. His anger at Ganon for kidnapping Zelda is justified. So it's not bad that he has anger and uses his anger to defeat evil. The challenge for him is to not let his anger consume him and turn him into a monster. Yes! Yes! Not allowing your rage to make you become an immoral or destructive person. He is using, he's not toxically masculine, but he is aggressively masculine. He is using things like anger and his drive and his desire for power to destroy Ganon and Aghanim, push him forward, and all he has to do is stay a moral person and remember that he needs to save Zelda. This is explicitly delved into a little later, so I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit. But this doesn't treat violence as inherently an evil, bad thing. When Link is trying to save Zelda, violence is a moral thing that he has to become better at the art of violence. Once again, a fantastic 2-page spread. This would have been the start of a new chapter in Nintendo Power Magazine. So what do we got? This massive fantasy crescent moon and this massive silhouette of a castle. Link holding his pendant and standing heroically. And the villain zooming in on him as he promises to exterminate the line of Link's family, the knights that Link descended from. So our villain is exterminating whole groups of people. And later we're going to see our villain burning books. There are primal ideas of evil which characterize the villain in contrast to Link. So this I thought was kind of interesting. So Zelda's essentially praying in her dungeon, and there's this glow that they both experience together. I call this kind of like quasi-religious imagery, praying and then a bright glow, where they're not ascribing this to any angel or deity or fairy or anything, but these kinds of images are being used because they connect so well with the medieval Christian world, the romantic ideas about knights in shining armor that Nintendo is drawing from to create the world of Hyrule and Link's story. This was kind of a little goofy, but utterly charming. So he sees the blaze in the library. He dumps a bucket of water on his head, and you see his cartoony bug eyes. And then he runs in, having drenched himself, to rescue the old librarian. And once again, we got a beautiful... Sorry, guys, I had an itch. A beautiful thatched roof cottage with a water wheel. I'm sure that Shotaro had a nice collection of images for that kind of thing to build these worlds. So he figures out where he has to go, and they give him these miracle wings to aid him. And the second I saw this, I thought of Skyward Sword, which is one of my least favorite games in the franchise because it's so hand-holdy. But I loved riding on those birds in Skyward Sword. And I don't know, I think they knew for a long time at Nintendo that they had this idea of people in Hyrule riding into battle on these massive birds, but it's just so interesting for me to see this being published in 1992, and then in 2008, the late 2000s, then they produce a game for the Nintendo Wii that fulfills this promise of seeing knights riding into battle on massive, powerful birds. It's just great ideas for a fantasy world. So Link flies into the desert, and a little bit more of his kind of comedic worrying about not being able to find himself, worrying about how hard he has to work. And this whole fight was sick. Up comes a massive scorpion with a pendant on it, and he gets trapped by a land mola. And this is probably... So one thing I kept doing while reading this is, like, after I finished a chapter, I would flip back and kind of review where I've been. So I have not seen not The Force Awakens, but The Last Jedi yet, because I just don't care that much about the new Star Wars. There are tons of heated debates about whether Rey is a Mary Sue or not, and I'm not going to get into that. I thought she was okay the first time I watched the movie, but I wasn't that invested in her. And then the argument is, well, is that because she's a female character and you hate female characters? Well, I think the best point that could be made is, if you imagine Luke doing this, having the same experience Rey had, Luke wouldn't be nearly as interesting a character because he'd constantly be succeeding. So let's review. All right, so now I've slowly gone through the story with lots of tangents. Now let's see if I can speed through this, because the point I'm trying to make is, when reviewing this story, so much kick-butt stuff has happened. Link awakes. He saves the princess. He fails. He gets his butt kicked by Aghanim. The princess gets kidnapped. Link tries again. He seeks out power. He gets roasted as too weak by the wizard. He gains more power. He realizes his journey. He finds an old man. He comes here. This is paced with a lot of boom, 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 because it was for a monthly serial, and every chapter had to kick butt and stand all by itself. And Link keeps getting his butt kicked. But now he's facing this massive physical threat that he can't even use his sword on. And look at this thing. It's filling 2 pages worth of stuff, and that's what he's got to kill. This is now Link becoming a real kick-ass adventurer in his own right. Look, now it's filling 2 pages again. This is rad. This is knocking your socks off, and this is an artist who knows that he's kicking your butt with the visuals of his story and is loving it. Dang it. Wow. Good grief. So I think this is where I'm about to check out, and I'm nearly getting to 30 minutes here. So I'm reaching the point where I'm ready to check out and tell you, just go read the rest of this for yourself. The last moment I really want to look at is Link encounters his parents and his uncle, kind of almost speaking to him from beyond the grave, but they're in the dark world, which is used to be the realm of the Triforce, this all-powerful magical object. And it was perverted by Ganondorf into a dark world. Here we go. So Link collapses in the desert, and I'm sorry, I skipped a page. This is important. So Link reaches out towards his dead parents, and this starts transforming him into a monster, or sort of werewolf-like creature. And the wizard tells him, the good wizard tells him that this is kind of evil within Link that's turning him into a monster. And then Link falls asleep in the desert, and he has a dream where he is with Zelda in a field of roses, and he awakens next to her with his head in her lap. And when he awakens, his hand is bandaged, and he's healing from the spiritual plight he faced when his anger and his desire for revenge started literally turning him into a monster. So what's the thing that Link needs besides just violence and power and anger to defeat Aghanim and Ganondorf? He needs the love of Princess Zelda. This is incredible. Love is what motivates Link to risk his life at great personal cost to himself with no promise of reward. He is enduring all of this alone for the sake of a person he barely knows, because he cares about her as a human being. And there's often a romantic subtext to these stories, but it doesn't even need to have that. This could be a completely chaste relationship where he just cares about Zelda as a human being and loves her as a human being and is pursuing all of these trials for her sake. Incredible. So I'm just going to encourage you to read the rest. The great morality of these stories continues. There's a whole character who I can't even talk about who's original to this manga and isn't in the game. There are great over-the-top explosions and terrifying castles. There's everything a fantasy story needs. I want to find one. This spoke to me, this whole thing here. So after he's saved the day, he has a vision of his uncle and his parents. I just want to read this to you. You, however, the context for this is they've told him about, how years ago people died fighting Ganon just to imprison him in that world. So they couldn't kill Ganon, they couldn't defeat him. They just locked him away. They contained Ganon's evil. You, however, accomplished a much more lonely and difficult victory. It was not only by your own power, but also that of many generations of knights and wise men who preceded you. Let the memories of their efforts humble you. Burp Squad. Let the memories of their efforts humble you. Never forget. I ruined this beautiful moment. But yeah, after you've read all this story, this clicks with you because you've mostly seen Link alone for large chunks of this story. He hasn't had an army of people helping him. He hasn't had a government or the king or secret societies guiding him and telling him what to do. He had to figure all this stuff out mostly on his own as kind of a whiny kid who wasn't really sure what he was getting into. But he was helped by people like a fairy, like the old wizard, like the wise librarian, and he's simultaneously being praised for his individual efforts, for the loneliness of the task he had to undertake. And he's being reminded that even though he was alone for many parts of this journey, he alone didn't accomplish this feat. There were generations before him that had to sacrifice their lives to make it possible for him to even accomplish this task. So this is simultaneously praising his individual spirit and his virtue while humbling him by helping him recognize that he alone isn't the only important person in the universe. This is incredible. This is an incredible moral message to instill in young people. Oh my goodness. And then there's this sort of sad ending where Zelda feels like while he was rescuing her, they had this intense emotional connection through their dreams. And now he feels isolated and she feels alone. I just wanted to just propose to her right there. But the way this is left off is, you could imagine there are cultural reasons why he can't marry Princess Zelda. She may only be weddable to a lord or a foreign prince. So no amount of valor can make that possible for him. I don't know. They leave it bittersweet and up in the air. But what this brings home is that this isn't a story about the patriarchy telling Link that he can go claim his property, Princess Zelda. This is a story telling young men to sacrifice themselves for the sake of others without any expectation of a reward in return. And this is the picture they chose for the cover, right? This powerful sword hidden in the forest, and centuries later, it's entirely encrusted with moss and wildlife, waiting to be reclaimed again by a new hero. And because it's a magical sword, it retains its vigor for all time. I haven't listened to many of Jordan Peterson's lectures on fairy tales in the Bible and storytelling, but I do have a feeling I'd click with him a bit since he's so interested in these kind of ideas. But can't you see how this speaks to something in the human soul? And I was moved by this book. And I believe that you could be moved by this book without being the biggest weeb or the biggest fan of the Legend of Zelda franchise, because it's Arthurian legend, it's Star Wars, it's all of these very powerful, great elements of fantasy storytelling being combined together by an artist who is excellent in his craft. So I'm just going to let you see the little thing at the end there. If you're interested to go look for more by Shotaro, what's the other one? Cyborg 9. I'm going to go look for that. Anyway, I love you guys, and I will catch you later. I may have broken my Mario record with this one. I want you to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications if you want to be notified when I have more videos go up in the future. Catch you later.